You know what kills me is when people take their venison hindquarters and they grind the whole thing into burger or sausage. That is a gigantic waste of really, really good meat. Very often what I'll do is I'll cook some venison hindquarter for people, slice it across the grain like it's supposed to be sliced, and people go, man, that is really good backstrap. And by the way, when you're talking backstrap, that's not tenderloin. Tenderloin is on the inside, those little flat muscles on the inside. Backstrap is outside, backstrap is loin, tenderloin is inside, is the little flat piece. So, of critical importance with any kind of hindquarter muscles is that you don't want to overcook it. This is top round. So you can cook this whole, you can stuff it, butterfly it, wrap it up. When you go to serve it though, you want to make sure that you slice it across the grain. If you look at meat photos, go to a magazine, go to a cookbook, and you see these lines running through the meat, whether it's a tri-tip or a piece of venison like this, it's been cut the wrong way. You want to cut across the grain so you don't see those lines in your meat. Here's what I do when I get a piece of meat that I haven't processed, that I'm unfamiliar with if I'm cooking somebody else's venison. First thing I do is I just cut a little piece off like this. I got a hot skillet over here. I'll put a little bit of olive oil in it, and I'm just gonna cook it rare to medium rare and see how it behaves in the pan. A little bit of salt, maybe a little bit of seasoning. If you cook your venison well done, if you cook the better cuts of the venison well done, what you're gonna end up with is a livery, dry piece of meat. That's enough. I got a little color in there, just enough seasoning. Take a bite. It's really tender. Let me just show you how easily this tears apart. It's very tender. It's very mild tasting. I can do whatever I want with this piece of meat, but I'm more than likely gonna sear it. All right, I'm gonna take the top round and show you one of the recipes that I use to convince people that venison actually tastes good. Into the skillet, I've got some of the High Mountain brisket rub, and then when I flip that over, I'll cook the B side. I'll also throw a bunch of mushrooms in there because I have a bunch of mushrooms, and some red onion. And the garlic I'll put in there last because I don't want to burn the garlic. So here's another thing, if you happen to come across a tough piece of meat, whether it's an elk and rut or deer and rut, it can be lean, it can be a little bit sinewy, a little bit tougher. This deal right here, there's a number of different ones on the market. This one happens to be made by Jacquard, J-A-C-C-A-R-D. It's got these little surgical steel flat blades in there, and what that does is it cuts through the connective tissue of the meat. So you do this, and you can find pieces of meat like this in the grocery store that you can see it's got these little Jacquard marks through it, but it doesn't change the texture of the meat. It doesn't turn it into cube steak, it doesn't turn it into hamburger, it just cuts across the connective tissue, so it's a much more tender piece of meat. Let me flip this guy over. I'm gonna start reducing a little port wine in here. And the port wine is gonna reduce, and that's gonna add a little bit of sweetness to it. I'll balance that with some balsamic vinegar, and then I'm gonna finish it with butter. We've got the mushrooms, it's done, it's really easy. And by the way, this recipe works with any kind of antlered game, waterfowl, pork, beef, easy, easy, easy. All right, it's just gonna take a minute. I'm going to reduce that port wine, but I don't want to overcook that venison steak, so I'm going to take my time. All right, so as the port wine is reducing, and this port wine's a little sweet, if you're using something that's not so sweet, add a little berry preserves or something in there to balance this balsamic vinegar. Balsamic vinegar, port wine. The port wine is going to give it sweetness. The balsamic vinegar is going to make it a wee bit acidic. I've got some garlic here that's fresh chopped garlic. There's some fresh rosemary. And then once this reduces a little bit more, I'm gonna mount it with butter, with chilled butter. So we're reducing a little bit more, and I'm gonna turn it off now because I don't want to burn it. Now I'm gonna add that butter. And I'm just gonna whisk this butter in, or stir this butter in until it turns that into a nice creamy sauce. So I took the venison off while the sauce was reducing because I didn't want to overcook it. I want you to see what that looks like. That is a properly cooked piece of deer meat. So that's going to go here. Now the sauce. And some mushrooms. And I don't normally eat my own stuff on camera because have you ever had anybody eat something on camera and not just say, oh my God, that's the best piece of deer I've ever had? They're not gonna say, this needs a little salt, or maybe I overcooked it. It's always perfect and their knees always buckle. I'm gonna hit it with a little bit more seasoning. That's the way I cook a piece of deer meat out of the hindquarter. You'll notice it looks so much better than hamburger.